feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming in Monday afternoon. It's October 2nd, and we are in it. Timberwolves training camp, preseason, whatever you want to call it, it has begun. The Wolves had a few practices over the weekend before, I believe, Sunday afternoon. They left for Abu Dhabi. Timberwolves beat writer Chris Hine from the Star Tribune. You were at those practices over the weekend. Nice little wave. Yeah. Now it's
year,
you
baby.
too.
Yeah.
But you skipped the trip to Abu Dhabi just to come on this pod, right?
Yeah, basically. It was come on the pod or go to Abu Dhabi. I chose come on the pod.
There you go. It's probably been a couple months since we've done one.
It has.
I've seen you, but
I know we've hung out, but we haven't formally hung out on the internet for people to see.
That's what counts.
I'm good. You know, we're gearing up. Good summer of vacation travel, and we're feeling rejuvenated and ready to go. This will be my 6th season covering.
Congrats! I'm pumped to just be hanging out with you guys all again at the facility, and everything's been pretty normal thus far. I was talking with Kyle about that after media day of like, oh, okay, that was nice. Like it was a media day where it was like almost kind of boring.
Nothing really happened.
Right?
This is number 6. So half of the media days I've covered had some sort of dramatic thing overhanging it. And this was one of the few that didn't. It was like a normal, by the numbers kind of media day.
Which is a good and normal place to start for a team that has good and normal expectations to be a good and normal team this season. So I'm excited for like what that actually means for our coverage. Like in Sunday's paper, you were just, kind of getting right into it, the basketball of it, right? In your article on Cat and Ant, it was no like big picture, this and that, or is everything going to be okay? It's like, no, like let's
get into the nitty gritty of it. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, there's something that's nitty gritty about the Cat and Ant thing, but it's also a big deal, right? Like they need, as what was the thesis of your article, is like they need to get Cat and Ant in their tandem back to what it was the year before Rudy got here, in conjunction with Rudy in the mix. You use some fancy numbers and such for that to highlight that it wasn't.
You've never used fancy numbers in your analysis. Yeah. You're famously anti-fancy number.
Yes, that's true. That's very true. What do you think? So it's this Cat Ant thing, right? There's kind of like two folds to it, right? It's the two of them having a really high level of success when it's just the two of them on the floor, no Gobert, right? That is the expectation. There's no real reason to believe that won't be the case. So if we kind of assume that's going to be good, what is it going to take that good and kind of have Rudy in the mix there as well with Cat as the 4? How do Cat and Ant maintain that chemistry in a lineup construction when Cat's the 4?
If you listen to Chris Finch tell it, it's all spacing. Like that is the buzzword that he will use to tell you that has to improve. And that seems to be what they are most focused on in training camp, is figuring out what that spacing looks like. Ant said, at the end of the year last year that he felt like something kind of unlocked in his head. That was a quote of his that stuck out to me from that Denver series. And the proof was in how he played in that series, where he finally kind of figured out how he can operate, what the lane looks like with Gobert on the floor, along with Cat. So spacing is the big buzzword, something to watch out for maybe in the exhibitions, is how they kind of manipulate that. I harken back to one thing that Finch also said last year around this time, and it was kind of a fear of ours, something we kind of talked about, is like, does Cat just become like a spot up shooter? Is Cat just standing in the corner shooting corner threes in this offense? And Finch always was very adamant that no, that's not going to be what Cat does in this offense now that Rudy's here. He's going to be involved. He's going to still be Cat in some way, shape, or form, even with Rudy Gobert in the paint. I still think, and I think you agree, is that Karl needs to take more threes, or should be taking more threes when they're all on the floor together, because that'll help with the spacing. What it looks like otherwise, in terms of Karl operating inside the 3-point arc, I don't know, but that is certainly one way that you alleviate some of the spacing issues, is by telling Karl, like, just be ready to shoot threes.
It feels like the place to start, right?
Right.
Like there are multiple puzzle pieces to making this work. That one, to me, makes sense. Let's get that volume back up a little bit, particularly when Rudy's on the floor. Finch has said it, and Ant basically did when you asked him about that. He thought it kind of started with Cat shooting threes as well. Let's play that clip.
You said after the season that kind of late in the year, and especially in that playoff series against Denver, that you kind of figured out how to play with Karl and Rudy, and kind of what that meant for you in terms of being able to drive and things like that. What kind of unlocked in your head, do you think, and how did you maybe try to maximize that over this summer?
Man, Cat just shoot the piss out the ball, and it's incredible to see. It's incredible to play with somebody like him, and coming off screens, and he's popping every time is great, and Rudy rolling. So I think it's going to be dynamic this year, even with Mike Conley, not even me, because I'm more of the guy who's looking for his own shot. But like Mike Conley, it's going to be great for him for sure.
Finch was kind of talking about how trying to get you and Karl back to some of that chemistry that you guys had maybe 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
What does that look like when you guys are really working well together?
Oh, we're going to see it this year, man. Like I said, Cat, he's super healthy. He's feeling good. I'm feeling good. So, yeah, I think it should be fun. As long as we stay healthy, I think it should be super fun to see how, we start to gel together, try to get back to where we was probably 2 years ago for sure.
So, Chris, when I think about this, like, what are the 3 most dynamic things, let's say offensively, that Cat does, right? He's a floor spacer, the 3-point shooter, elite 3-point shooter for a big. He's got that really high level pump and go game, drive into the basket, and he's got the post up game that he can really eat, particularly, if it's single coverage there. I think for him, and again, we say this all the time, like the most adjustment, the more specific things, nuances are on Karl, because I think he more than anyone needs to be adjusting dependent on personnel, right? And when it's Rudy out there with him, he does need to be intentional about that volume going up. I was looking it up this morning, that 2 years ago that Ant's talking about, or you're talking about, we're all talking about how, man, the Cat-Ant chemistry was really good. Well, that was a low 3-point volume season for Cat. So can he bump that up? Can he bump that up in the minutes that Rudy's on the floor, right? I think he needs to do that. And then it's got to be the pump and go game when he's guarded by 5s, right? And Rudy's off the floor. Karl's in there with Ant. That's the opportunity there. And then I think for me, like maybe the post game is when he's out there with neither of them, really. You know, it's maybe Cat and 3-4 bench guys out there as the rotation shakes out. But I do think the one, right, that we're most concerned about is how he fits, or how you just get more productivity out of the lineups that include Ant, Cat, and Rudy. And it's not the relegating Cat to the corner thing, like Finch says he doesn't want to do, but it's like a cousin of that, where it does need to be some intention of like, maybe this isn't when I'm looking to get my drive to the basket. Maybe this isn't when I'm looking to get my post-ups, because Rudy is there and he is habitating the area in which I need to use. I know that's like way overly simplified, but I think that does signal what Cat needs to be sort of in tune to. And the coaching staff and point guards or whatever lead ball handlers need to be kind of running actions that help him with that, particularly at the beginning of the season.
I think you're right. I think some of the post up stuff naturally goes away, obviously, when Rudy's on the floor and he's kind of occupying the same space. But we also saw last year too, I'm thinking early in the season before Cat got hurt, we did see Cat operate down there a decent amount. At least this is just anecdotally.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
But and that was when Cat was like really trying to involve Rudy. It was like Cat would be down there. He would face a double of some sort, because I think most defenses would rather get the ball out of Karl's hands and into Rudy's hands in that situation. So Karl was very intentionally, we saw, trying to involve Rudy in the offense in those situations last year. So another facet of this to me is, does that continue? Does Karl, really, his intentionality with which he's trying to get Rudy touches and buckets, does that continue? And does Ant continue with that? And we were there yesterday, and Rudy talked yesterday, and a little bit of the conversation was about how, he's working on the lob game with Ant. And he shared a little tidbit. I don't have the audio of it, but he shared a tidbit of some of the conversations that they've had, which was that Rudy has told Ant that he always thought the hardest person for him to defend as a big man was James Harden, because he didn't know when James Harden was going to shoot it, when he was going to maybe give a lob pass. The timing was never right. Rudy never felt when James Harden was coming at him.
And we're picturing like Harden, Capella lobs, like Houston
exactly.
sort of deal, right?
Like,
That's what I'm picturing.
The Houston days, He just
never, Finch was there.
He never quite knew what to expect. And the point that Rudy, I think, was trying to drive home to Ant was, the better you get at lobs, actually the easier it is for you to score, because teams are going to have to respect that. If you don't develop the lob game, people are just going to, guard you, and they're going to make,
which is where it's at right now.
Which is where it's at right now, right?
And he's already good and productive, right? Like, it is a suggestion to raise the ceiling, right? Or if we do the, as is going to be like stated ad nauseum this year, is like Ant making the leap. What does that look like? Like, these are the things. It's getting better at the things that you're already good at, and one of that would be driving, right? Ant's really strong at driving. Can he get fouled a little bit more? Can he find Rudy on the lob a little bit more in those places? Like, it's really, the more I think about it, I do think that ceiling, at least offensively, has a lot of space above where Ant was. Certainly, last season. Maybe some of that's just natural progression with the getting older, playing for the national team this summer. But that's interesting. I was not at practice yesterday, but
see what you missed when you're not there.
I don't think my fantasy football team could have pulled off the victory without
if you weren't there coaching them up through the 1 o'clock games.
I gave Kyron Williams a big talk before the game. Actually, let's grab our first break here. I want to tell everyone a little bit more about Falling Knife and the live event that we're going to be doing there. Falling Knife is hosting Wolves Fest. They're calling it on October 14th, starting at 4 p.m. I wanted to hit on some more details of the event. I've been kind of telling you guys all about that. But in addition to Britt and I doing a live pod at 5 p.m., and in addition to watching the Wolves' first stateside preseason game against the Knicks at 6:30, there's also going to be food from Rectangle Pizza. There's going to be Wolves merch for sale. Obviously, beers and seltzers and alcoholic slushies from Falling Knife. And we'll be giving a lot of those things away, too. We'll have, we'll be giving away pizza from them, the merch. We're going to have some tickets to give away, plenty of free drinks and that sort of thing. So, again, just keep October 14th on your radar. That's Saturday, October 14th. Come at 4 o'clock. Hopefully we'll have good weather. We can hang out outside. There'll be sound outside when the show's going on as well. Live show at 5. And then we will watch the game at 6:30. All right, Chris. Let's keep moving along here. The other two topics we wanted to hit on in this episode, where you also wrote about the maturity of the group. But the one thing I said I wanted to talk about was Mike Conley. I think it would kind of do this thing where, or I do, I know you do as well, where we just kind of like check out, right? For like 5-6 weeks in the summer, we have that, we have that window.
That's correct.
Well, it's not a full checkout, but it allows you to forget some of the stupid stats and quotes and stuff like that are in your mind. And then we kind of get back to this time of the season and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I think the one thing that has just really been rejogged in my memory is just how effective Mike Conley was last season, and what that meant, not what that meant for last season, but what it could mean for this team this year over the course of 82 games. Now, there's the age factor with him getting a little bit older. They're going to probably play a little bit different style of play this season. And I'm fascinated to see, and I think it's pretty critical how to what degree Mike is able to fold into this season's version of this team. Quite frankly, if he is as good as he was last season in the 24 games he played for the Wolves over the course of 82, I mean, you're talking about like a near all-star level of what he was doing, which is not the expectation at all with this team.
Right.
I think that's important to remember, like in the context of Mike can be really, really, really effective, but also maybe that was a high watermark. Maybe that was a smaller sample size. Much like with Cat, they need to find these ways in which to give Mike, the leeway and opportunity to become the dynamic player he was after a few, he's kind of started a little bit slow, but after he came in from D'Lo, he really kind of absorbed that D'Lo role as a scorer and more. When you just think about Mike Conley this season, I think we kind of the five starters, probably brush over him the most, right? You got the big three. You got Jaden is up and coming. He's got the contract. And it's like Mike Conley. Yeah, he's the veteran point guard. He's going to
almost take him for granted.
Right. Like, I think that's what I'm catching myself doing, is having taken him for granted because he was just so effective last season. How do you, when you just think about Mike in this puzzle, where is your head going this season?
Kind of, the cliche, a little bit of the Swiss Army knife,
Sure.
Does a little bit of everything well, right? He'll defend. He's a better defender than D'Lo was. And just looking at his numbers, like just taking the numbers from when he was in Utah to Minnesota, I mean, just to throw some of them out, 10.7 points a game with Utah, 14 with the Wolves. 41% from the floor overall to 46% with the Wolves, 36% from three-point range to 42%. Assists went down, but the Wolves were asking him to score more, 7.7 assists to 5. But just efficient, did what they needed him to do, kind of helped unlock Rudy on the offensive end. I mean, how many times did we see, kind of late in the season, when they got that side pick and roll going between him and Rudy, which was the most effective Rudy's ever looked on this team on offense, where it was in those moments. So for me, I think, and we talked with Mike about this, he felt a little rejuvenated that the Wolves were asking him to do these things again, to be looking for a shot, to be actively trying to score, because him actively trying to score is going to free things up for the rest of the offense. It's going to alleviate some of the pressure, especially on Ant. Teams just can't load up on trying to defend Ant if Mike Conley's out there shooting 40% from 3-point range. So I think it was a seamless fit after he realized what they needed out of him. And I don't anticipate, you never know what guys who are in their mid 30s, right? As somebody who's also in their mid 30s, I wake up waiting for the drop off of my quality of life every day. Right. But I mean, I don't anticipate a significant drop off. At least I wouldn't. I mean, his numbers have been steady the last few years, and can he shoot 38 to 40% from 3-point range? I absolutely think he can. Can he score 13, 14 a game? Yeah. I don't see why he can't continue what he was doing last year.
Yeah, let's play what Mike said at practice on Saturday. I thought this was, indicative of him acknowledging how productive he was, which I don't think we got a lot of last season. Here's Mike Conley.
We talked a lot when kind of the beginning when you got here last season, like how much you were doing to stabilize the group and what you were bringing to the group. But just kind of looking back at your numbers since you were here, you were just really productive in your 25 games or so here. What did this group do for you individually to get cleaner looks, commit fewer turnovers, whatever that might be?
Honestly, I just they gave me confidence in a lot of ways. You know, honestly, not that I needed it, but just like that extra little bit to say, hey, Mike, we need you to be this. We need you to be aggressive. We need you to shoot that. We need you to look to, you know, break the paint and make plays. And
So like specific, them being like specifically we need this.
yes, yeah, it just gave me more like just more on my plate, I guess. You know, and I'm used to having that kind of workload, but you get times where you get caught in sitting corners and you just kind of space out and you kind of just, you know, end up not being able to put an imprint on games. When I got here, they expected me to like guard the ball, like guard this person, chase this guy, like, no, you got him, like that kind of stuff is like, all right, like they need me to win, I have to do this. So it just gave me a little bit more, you know, extra motivation to go out there and just be myself and kind of get back to what I'm good at.
Did you think you would get an opportunity in your career, like when you were in Utah? Did you think you'd get another chance to be that type of player again?
No, I didn't think so. I honestly thought it was kind of trending towards, you know, just corner spot up shots and you know, just being a spacer and guarding guys around the court. But like I said, to have that kind of revamp me a little bit, like going the summer workouts, I'm like, man, I'm working towards like that. Like I'm not working towards just working on only spot ups. Like I'm off the dribble, like getting in the paint, floaters, making plays. And, I glid through the paint today and did like a reverse layup. You know, I look like Jordan out there today.
So, Chris, I kind of underrated, you know, that mentality shift of going from being, when you think you're just kind of moving into your career, of being just the corner spot up sort of guy, right? Like knowing your usage is going to go down and down, and you know, that just kind of naturally does happen to players as they get older, right? They're asked to have a different role. And I think normally you would believe, all right, it's an older player, he's getting asked to do more and his efficiency should drop. But what Mike did last year is an example of that, like being life-giving, right? Like, I mean, some of these stats, man, are nuts from last year. I mean, it was 24 games. He was amongst point guards, third in points per shot in that time. Only Steph Curry and Damian Lillard were better. Third in turnover rate amongst point guards. Only Brunson and Monte Morris were better. He got to the line a ton relative to his previous, like his history of getting to the line, and he made 86% of those free throws. Shot, like you said, shot more and shot better from three, 42% on those threes, 52% from the corner, 40 from above the break. And then just, wasn't just the scoring too. It was the passing possessions and the assists. I looked up just in his tracking data his possessions with the Wolves that led to a shot, turnover, or assist. That was 1.561 points per possession, which was third in the entire NBA last year, behind Kevon Looney's number one, not asked to do a whole lot of things there. Tyrese Halliburton 2, Mike Conley 3, Nikola Jokic 4, Domantas Sabonis also led the league in shots out of pick and roll in terms of efficiency. I mean, that's what I'm getting at is it was only 24 games, but the efficiency of those 24 games in his production was really next level. And to know that was a product of getting more exposure rather than like a whittling down to get more efficient, that makes that even more encouraging to me.
And I think the other thing that's encouraging about it was he did that. I felt like there was no drop off in his play, whether Cat was there or Cat wasn't there.
Yeah.
I feel like he was kind of the same player regardless of whether Cat was in the lineup. Because obviously
even Ant missed like 4 games.
Missed a couple games with the ankle. Yeah. Like he no matter who he was playing with, there wasn't really a drop off in play, and he did what was required. And I think too, what's going to be important for him on the defensive end of the floor, we've heard the Wolves want to be more switch heavy this year defensively, and having somebody that might be able to switch with Ant, you know, like that's going to enable them to be able to execute that, I think, at a better level than, say, if they had D'Lo still here on that end of the floor. So I think he's vitally important to what they want to do defensively this year as well, because he's so solid on that end as well. I think it's going to be interesting to see this year. The thing that I'll be kind of monitoring is, obviously, you have Cat and Ant and their usage numbers. It's like, who's going to be kind of like the third usage guy? Is it going to be Mike? Is it going to be Jaden? Kind of who takes, do either of those numbers tick up and one goes down? Like that'll be something I think will be interesting among the starting five, at least, is who's kind of like that third guy.
Who do you think was third in usage last year?
Kyle Anderson. No, not Kyle Anderson.
Maybe Jalen Noel. Like I wonder.
Yeah,
I mean that's like a different
per minute stat. Yeah.
I'm pulling it up here.
I mean, if D'Lo's
Luka Garza was too. It was Jalen Noel.
Yeah.
Like and then Mike and everyone else is a little bit further down there because they were playing with the starters as much. So I don't know, when you started saying that, I was like, I wonder if it'll be like Shake Milton or somebody off the bench who's asked.
Yeah, I meant among the starters. Like,
sorry, I knew you said that, but then I just started thinking about that, like, if I had to like bet right now who it's going to be. But of the starters, I think Mike was above.
I would say
Jaden.
Nas,
He was above.
Nas is probably your candidate off the bench to have a decent
that's probably a good one. But Mike was 16.8 usage and Jaden was 15.8 last year.
Yeah.
Is Jaden able to go up anymore? They're kind of saying
no.
All.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but it's kind of for both of them, right? Mm-hmm. It's like living in that slightly below average, average usage is 20%, right? You split 100% 5 ways. Mm-hmm. They're both going to be below that 20% bar, but I think for both Mike and Jaden, it's really important to not let them get down to like 11, 12, something like that, where Jaden kind of was earlier in his career. And I think with Mike, if you don't continue to enable some of that aggression, right? And he's at 11, 12% of the usage, then I'm not sure you get the efficiency from either of them, or just the locked inness. Kind of what he was just saying there, right? If I'm just in the corner, I'm going to be literally spaced out, and figuratively spaced out.
Yes,
in his mind. So that is definitely
same with Jaden too. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I feel like I really noticed that with Jaden. That's somewhat understandable as a younger player who's kind of asked to be in that corner role the most often. But for both of them, you need to be somewhat intentional about at least keeping them, I think, at those levels. Last thing on Mike, I think you and I were talking about this a little bit after practice. There's also, in talking to Finch, we talked to Nori, and there's more of this structure narrative this year, right? Like there's going to be more structure on this team. And I wonder, in the context of this Mike conversation, what impact that will have on him. He had all of this success productivity wise in a, the quote unquote free flowing offense. I would think of Mike as like a traditional point guard, so structure kind of makes sense for him too. But it was interesting, and other part of that media availability with him, he was like, I really like the free flowing, and we need to not let go of all of that. We need to kind of have structure to get us to the free flow. But that might be it might be that the free flowing is what got a little bit more Conley and McDaniel's usage there, right? Because with structure, the plays are going to be a little bit more scripted towards the main guys, Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a balance to watch too. If for some reason, first 20 games of the season, Mike isn't producing well, one thing I'm going to think of is, what is the impact of this additional structure had on him? Is that a factor in this? Or if it works, and we're 20 games into the season, Mike's numbers are here, but the offense does feel more structured. Does that mean they've been finding the free flow a little bit more naturally? So definitely something to, I think, be monitoring there as well.
I think so. I think the kind of the way that they're trying to go about the whole structure versus free flow makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's just to really jumpstart everything. Like just get something going.
Particularly the starting unit, right?
Particularly with the starting unit, and especially late in games too.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we see them just really not do much late in close games?
A lot.
A lot. Specifically that Lakers playing game, which was an eyesore to watch.
Right.
So it makes sense because, I think I wonder how just the average fans view kind of like, oh yeah, you should have more play calls versus being more free flowing. See, I tend to be more on the free flowing side of things because that makes you more unpredictable and I think harder to defend. Whereas like with play calls, people might not realize like, other teams scout your play calls and they know what's coming.
Yeah.
So I mean, you
it's
can
a fine
call
line.
a play. It's a fine line, right?
Mm.
But I feel like sometimes people want to get on Finch, like call more plays. He needs to call more plays. Why isn't he calling more plays? Well, that's why he doesn't call more plays, is because it'll make you more predictable to stop. So I am curious to see what this balance is, what the line kind of looks like, and if it really is just like kind of quick actions in the first couple seconds of a half court possession to just get them moving, essentially.
Right. It's just not too far one way or the other, right? It's like we can make like the pounding. Finch needs to make more play calls, and to be honest, I'm more on the like team structure side of this. But like for the people who are like banging on the table, oh, there does need to be more structure. Well, some of their best offensive games came with the most flow.
Yeah.
Jace asked Mike in that interview as well, what about that Knicks game? How many plays did you guys call in that game, which was their I think their highest scoring, most efficient game of the year? Mike said 3. We called 3 plays in that game. Like sometimes the freedom leads to efficiency. Also, I think we have plenty of games last year too, where the free flow led into late shot clock stuff. And it's, oh wait, how do we now, are we here with Rudy like posting up at 7-8 feet? Like the structure is to like chessboard out the guys, right? Spread them on the floor, then to be able to play out of that. It's not going to be like Utah. I mean, Utah looked the exact same, like 4 in the perimeter, Rudy coming up for the screen, like not every time, but so often. It's not going to look like that. I asked Mike Conley about that the other day, and he's like, no, that is like too far on that side of the spectrum. That is not, they're not going to get all the way over there. But sometimes will it have that more specific structure? I think so, at least more than last season. And it's what I will be looking for in Abu Dhabi, these first 2 games against the Mavs. Like how much to our eyes can we be like, this was way more structured than it was last season? Or is it, how much do they turn up that dial? I think that's all kind of to be determined, and maybe they need to figure out over the course of time a little bit.
I think so. It's kind of like a free flowing offense. It's going to be that. It's going to be a feel. It's going to be a feel thing. Like how do we best operate? Especially with the different personnel. How does it figure in when the bench starts mixing in, and who's running the show at point guard in those instances?
Yeah.
When Mike's not on the floor. So there's a lot of little kind of little subplots to that whole argument or that whole debate that I think will be interesting to follow early in the season. Just what it looks like with different lineups, and depending on who's the point guard as well.
Let's move over to the maturity topic, which is what you wrote on. You were asking about at Media Day and wrote on coming out of that for, I think that would have been Friday, for Friday's paper. That's clearly something you premeditated, planned to want to be asking about, and probably knew you were going to write it. So there's this was an idea that was kind of generated by you more so than it was by the players. Obviously, we know some of the reasons. But for you, your first article of the season, why did you feel that was such an important thing to hit on and define here?
Because I thought that was the biggest reason why they weren't top 4-5 seed last year and were in the play-in fighting for their lives at the end of the season.
Good answer.
Like that to me was the number one thing. Right. You could say all you want about Cat's injury and everything, but they had more than enough chances to make up for it and win games without him against some of those teams, and they punted it. Right. And whether it be maturity in games, whether it be just the preparation aspect of it, just the whole thing that maturity kind of encompasses.
Sure,
I think is a big thing. And the thing that I always kind of struck me last year was like, this is not really like a young, like it has young players, but it's not really like a young team overall, right?
Right.
Like you have some very established veterans on this team who should know better, or like, I think we think back to the Kyle Rudy altercation late in the season. It's like, you guys are veterans, like, figure it out. Like, this is what's going on here. And then of course Jaden punching the wall. So it's just like maturity cost this team so much last year. So much. If they were just a little bit more mature, the season looks a lot different. The postseason maybe looks different as well. You're not playing Denver in the first round. You're playing maybe a more favorable matchup. Maybe you get home court in the first round.
Right.
The margin was so thin between like 8 and 4.
Sure.
Like, it was just a couple of games.
Well, you put it in your story, 6 and 12 against the bottom 7 teams in the league.
Yep.
We win in 33% of 18 games against the bottom 7 teams in the league. Personally, that and technicals, and which is kind of related to general
in-game
ref
stuff.
Chaos. That's what I focus on, because I don't think, like, and I think this is pretty well vetted at this point, that like the Rudy and Kyle thing that's not a toxic relationship.
Of their relationship, right?
No, and Jaden punching the wall isn't indicative of him being some like irreversible hothead. I don't think that's who he is. Yeah, he runs hot sometimes, and he's also getting older and more mature, and that's on his radar. Like, I don't think it's going to be those blips. It's like you just kind of said there. It's the broader representation of what, maturity is, and less so like there's like immature is pejorative, being mature is a compliment. Like, they need to be mature, right? And I think had they been mature last season, that's maybe 4 or more wins or whatever it is, and that's the different, it's different placing in the standings and all those things, like you said, and you're not getting beat up by the bottom of the league. Let's play Kyle Anderson's answer to that, because I thought that was interesting, because I think he's talking about the broader sense here of being a more mature team.
One of the things that we've heard Tim, Finch, and on down the roster is more mature team this season. And from your first year here to this year, what are some of the things that you think this team needs to shore up to become a more mature team? And do you sense that maybe it's a little different this year coming in than maybe last year?
Yeah, I think just looking in the mirror first and foremost, just, kind of just the fact that I got into it with one of my teammates last year is just, that just didn't sit well with me this summer. And, getting 5 technicals last year was just, looking back at it, that's just not who I am. So maybe I could look at it as a rough year, but just looking forward to this year, being a better teammate, not costing my team points with technicals, things like that. That stuff shouldn't happen. And I think as a team, I think we should do a better job of preparing for games and giving ourselves a chance to win, knowing scouting report, knowing guys' tendencies, knowing personnel on the other team. I think in order to be good in this league, you have to give yourself a chance to win by preparing. And I think maybe we could do a better job as a team of that. But
so, Chris, I think that the prep part, that's what I'm talking about. It's like the night to night sort of things. And I think about this team specifically as we kind of picture how they're going to play. Like, there are going to be intense scouting reports out against them, specifically of how they want to guard Ant, right? Like, you're going to need to understand if they're being really aggressive doubling Ant, how to play off of that, to whatever degree they're loading up on Rudy or guarding Cat. Like, you're going to need to kind of know, it's going to be a major advantage if you're like, we're playing Charlotte and we think they're going to be guarding us like that. So you don't have to so Ant doesn't have to take the first 6-7 minutes of the game to kind of like feel it out, right? Be ready, to go there. And then obviously defensively too, the Wolves themselves are going to need to be really in tune to what their scouting report is of how they're going to be using Cat in that game, Cat and Rudy together, Rudy differently. Like you mentioned before, I think we're going to see a little bit more diversity in defensive coverage this season. Finch has hinted at Rudy playing up a little bit more. I think they actually get a double test of that against Dallas. I think you'll see that more Rudy not by the basket, but really aggressively out on Luka against Dallas. Can they get comfortable with that? Can they get comfortable in the drop? Can they get comfortable in switching? That is so much about prep, and the teams that do that, I think about like playoff teams are in the conference finals or whatever, that they just know who and what they are, and they are the mature teams that are ready to execute from the tip. And I think, yes, this team has some young players who aren't going to be on that right away. They got plenty of players on this roster who I think are guys who should be able to nail that and know that. That's Rudy every night. That's Kyle every night. That's Mike every night. And it should be Cat too. Again, I think Cat has the longest scroll of what that is going to be. But can those four in particular, the vets, instill that the tip every single game and get the Nas's, the Jadens, the Ants to kind of come along with it? That's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about this team being more mature and more effective because they're mature.
And that's what I mean when I say, like, it was surprising to see some of this stuff come from the more veteran guys last year, because you would think that they would be trying to set this tone. And I think with how things played out last year, and you heard it in Kyle's answer there, I think he feels the same way, where it's like, oh, we really have to stop that nonsense. Mm-hmm. And it really is, more than just seeing a teammate take a swing at another in a huddle. Totally. It is okay. It's a Tuesday night in early January, and here come the Pistons into Target Center, right? And we saw last year what happened in that situation. We, losing twice to Charlotte, losing twice to Washington, losing to Houston that one time.
Portland,
Spurs, Portland. That Portland game late in the year, that was one of the worst losses of the season. Everything almost unraveled right then and there.
Well, that's the thing too, man. It's like those losses hurt so much more when you're a contender, right? Like if
like,
instead of
let that happen,
exactly. It's like if they would, whatever, that let's say the Detroit game. I think that was New Year's Eve. Like if you lose that Detroit game, or if you lose that game on New Year's Eve and it's to, like Memphis, all right, like New Year's Eve, let's go out, let's brush that off. That is not what they're like turning into the new year was last season. That was rough, and it was hard, and it was the signal of a pattern, like being ready and capable to not lose as many. You're going to lose it to a couple bad teams a year. This isn't like we don't need to. I don't know. We don't need to freak out.
If that 6-12 number was 12-6, nobody's talking about this, right? Yeah,
9-9.
Right, exactly.
Like that. That's 3 more wins, man.
Right.
I think that's literally puts them as the 4 seed. Close to it, right?
Right.
And it won't be as cut and dry as that, but the kind of ethos behind that, I think could be really powerful. And it's, as we're going through so many of these things, it's like a lot of it is on the players, but so much of it is on Finch and his coaching staff, right? To how are we going to connect these dots effectively and as quick as possible. I'll just kind of leave you on that. Like, where with the coaching staff, how would you describe the task at hand that they have, and what is your belief on? It's not going to be awesome day one, but that's kind of a question I'm asking myself a lot: is how far into the season is it going to be until we kind of feel comfortable about, like, this team kind of knows who they are? And am I wrong to say that I think a lot of that has to do with the coaching staff kind of putting those pieces in place?
I think it is. It's trying to figure out what buttons do you hit now in October and November.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the buttons you have to hit to win games in October and November, we saw this last year with the defense, are not the buttons you want to be hitting long term for the team's success. And we talked about this the other day. We were sitting here in November of last year being like, they're trying all these different defensive coverages and it's not working. And we know, but the eye was like to be ready for April, right? With that, but it was kind of hurting them.
Yeah, I like this
in the interim, or in the immediate future. Yeah, like the short term future was maybe costing them some games, but the long term goal was that by the time April rolls around, they'll be a much more capable team of varying their defensive coverages or whatever. So
and I think they have that on their radar, right? Like
Yeah.
you can have that on your radar of like, we come April need to have X,
we
Y,
need to
Z
be here.
We need to have those things. So that needs to be a goal or the goal.
Right.
But like we can also do other things in October and November that aren't like divergent from that path, but are more focused on one or two things. Simpling it down, right?
Yeah.
Like I think
so. That's where I think the whole structure versus free flow. I think that's the new, almost like a new debate this year. Is like, how much structure do you need?
Right.
Does it come at the cost of developing the free flow offense and perfecting it?
Right.
Because you need the structure to get you through the games in November, and does that cost you in the long term or in the long run?
Dude, November's just got to be good, though. November's got to be good.
That way. I kind of see it shaping up that way, though.
Yeah,
like especially early on in the season. So I think that's to me the biggest thing the coaching staff is going to have to contend with is how much do we need to win games now versus getting this team ready for the potential playoff run.
No, I'm again, like you, as I've turned my brain back onto this over the past week or so, that is sticking out to me as well. And I think we know it is for the staff. These are the things that even Finch is admittedly like, we are figuring out right now. We don't know exactly. I think it's why Finch had a really stern demeanor at media day and hit home like how important training camp is, which is kind of in Abu Dhabi. Like they need to hammer some of this stuff home literally in these 7 days while you're in another country. That is going to be critical. And I think for us, kind of fun to track as we start watching some of these games and getting hints at what it's going to look like, talking to coaches, talking to the players. As you all listeners know, nobody's more on top of that day to day than Chris is. As always, you can follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine, but make sure you are getting all of his stories over at the Star Tribune, whether that's delivery or just at startribune.com. Plenty of things for us to be writing about and to be talking about here. Chris, we'll do a couple more episodes before the season actually gets here, so I don't need any like predictions or anything like that.
Right.
But we're figuring it out.
Can I just make a quick appeal to people? You know, we always say, subscribe to the Star Tribune and all this. And I just want to appeal to people that like, it means a lot if you subscribe to the Star Tribune, and it means a lot to my coverage. You subscribing is kind of almost an indirect, but a direct way of like making sure that like I'm still able to like go to games, go to the road games, ask questions of people, get those quotes and sound bites from road locker rooms that you maybe otherwise would not have.
Can I chime in on that too?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Because literally, I mean, I maybe go to like 15 games a year at all 40 or 41 or whatever. And it is so critical for me and my coverage because I straight up can't afford or don't have to, I can't go to all of those games. And like literally, if Chris is not there, there will not be coverage of those 41 games unless, it happens to be one of the few games that me or John do go. So, obviously like the Star Tribune is a big company and a successful company, but it does need that for
support.
us to get that support that I need. And I think let's be real. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably the type of person who's day to day,
consumes this kind of stuff. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And Chris is critical for that too. So I'm glad you said that, Chris.
So and that also, by the way, also applies to other sports in the market. Sure. Wild, Vikings, Twins. Like your subscriptions help make sure that we're still there on the road when people otherwise might not be. So
absolutely, man. It's a weird.
There's a reason.
No, that's great. We're in a weird time in trying to effectively monetize journalism. That's why we're doing this on freaking YouTube right now, to be able to make it all work. We are all going to make it work, but it works when people listen. It works for me when people patronize the the sponsors here, and it makes it work for Chris to subscribe to his writing, which you get all of it. He writes so much. There's so much on there. You click on little Chris Hine. There's a ton.
There's something every day during the season. Sometimes multiple things a day. You know, there's no shortage of content once the season gets rolling. So
if you're feeling lean, that's your place, and that's the price. So again, he's Christopher Hine. Follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine, and check out his work at the Star Tribune. Chris, we'll get back together next Monday, hopefully after another 49ers win. Who do they got next week?
We got the Cowboys.
Oh,
it's going to be a good one. Sunday Night Football next week.
Oh wow, yeah, that'll be first thing in the morning right after that. Now part of me wants the Cowboys to win.
Why? So I'm miserable coming out here, or what?
No. All right. He's Chris. I'm Dane. Again, follow him on there. You follow me on Twitter at DaneMooreMBA, and all your subscribing on the YouTube channel or over on TikTok and Instagram at DaneMooreMBA_podcast. Follow our content there as well. Until tomorrow with Britt. Peace out.